Hello and welcome everyone to this Vodacast panel discussion on what has become an important issue for us in Johannesburg. My name is Bill Haslam and I'm the chairman and representative of SAPRA, which is the Saxon-Wold and Parkwood Residents Association. A little while ago, a discussion took place on the SAPRA community website, the WhatsApp group, concerning our city councillors. Passionate views were expressed as to whether they were doing their jobs properly to ensure that the city administration provided adequate services to the community as experienced by the community themselves. Now, one must see this against the backdrop of some serious service delivery failures, such as massive water leaks resulting in suspended water provision, electricity blackouts, sewer failures, a serious number of potholes throughout the suburbs, robots not working, and so forth. If the councillors were not representing the residents, then who is? This is a theme that needs to be examined and ventilated in a calm and thoughtful manner so that residents can better understand the workings of the city to their and everyone else's advantage. To do this, SAPRA has elected to host panel discussion on this subject. So now let's turn to the panel. Our first panel member is a community activist, particularly in the local government arena. She is a director of Trusted Utilities, a founder and director of Friends for Better Education, and a shareholder and director of an energy company. She has studied local government law and practices and advises companies and residents on their rights as citizens of Johannesburg. Welcome, Renee Kilner. And Renee, we have to thank you for taking the initiative on this particular panel. Thank you for your help in setting it up, and we look forward to hearing your discussions. Next, we have a practicing advocate and a specialist on compliance. She is a passionate, and she says concerned, but I say passionate because I've seen her in action. She's an activist in our community, keen to represent the views of ordinary ratepayers. Welcome, and thank you, Renata van Onselen. We look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you.
And then, and most importantly, we need to have a city councillor to represent that side of the discussion. Now, unfortunately, Tim Truluck, who is our city councillor, is recovering from an operation and is unable to be here today. He sends his apologies, but we are very fortunate in having a city councillor from Ward 87. That is the ward next door to Ward 117. Thank you, Kyle Jacobs, for sparing your very precious time. And I know that's precious because to try and get hold of you is very difficult, but thank you for contributing today. Kyle is a qualified attorney, and as I say, he's the city councillor. I can attest to the fact that he is a passionate city councillor and committed, because I've also seen you in action, Kyle, so it's very worthwhile for you to be with us today, and thank you very much for being here.
Thanks.
So Bill, maybe if I can just chip in there about the role of a councillor. I mean, Johannesburg is a really good example of just how the city has deteriorated over a period of time, and it's a good example of exceptionally bad governance over a period of time. The roles of councillors, and I think that we are all misconstruing what the role of a councillor actually is as a result of this bad governance. The role of a councillor is not to escalate conflicts, is not to fix potholes, is not to fix billing queries. That's not the role of a councillor. The role of a councillor is actually to look at how do we move the city forward, what are the developmental things that are required. So if we look at the development plan and how do we move the development of a city forward, and what, as the development of the city goes forward, what is required in that councillor's ward as to do those things, and how does that all integrate with the plan of the city to move forward. That's the role of the councillor actually. But because the administration has been so terrible for the last 30 years in the city, the councillors' roles have been denigrated and becoming query clerks.
Mr. Fix-It-Man.
Mr. Fix-It-Man.
Renee, I largely agree with you and what you've said, and if I can just get more detail to the actual structure. Beginning with the council structure, when a local government election comes around, residents elect a ward councillor and they vote for a political party on the proportional representation ballot. A proportional representation councillor is the equivalent of a councillor, but is in proportion with the amount of votes a certain political party received in that local government election. So if a political party receives 20% of the proportional representation votes, they'll get 20% of the proportional representation seats. And in Johannesburg, there's 135 proportional representation seats on top of 135 ward-based seats. And the ward-based seats are tied to wards that are geographically structured with demarcations, such as Ward 117 or Ward 87 or the other 132 wards, 133 wards around the city. So these councillors then go into council, and then once council is constituted, they have to form a government. And this is either done if a political party wins an outright majority, then that political party will set up their government. This is exactly the same in the province or in parliament at a national level. However, if no political party gets an outright majority, then they have to do what is a coalition, and we've become very familiar with coalitions in this country, where different political parties will try and form an agreement to form a government and put a government together. And this is what we've seen in Johannesburg since 2016. So political parties gather together to form a coalition government of sorts, and what happens then is this government elects a mayor, who is the head of that government, and the mayor from there appoints a number of MMCs, being members of mayoral committees. And these members of mayoral committees with the mayor run the city at a political level and set the political direction, the strategic direction, policy direction in terms of whatever their agenda or manifesto is of the time, and trickles this down to the administration, who then formulate this in terms of actual policies written on paper, structuring of budgets, and
that's very much like a board in a company. So the board is actually directing, appoints the managing director.
Yes.
Okay,
and that's a very important point, Bill, because a very important thing is they'll do a selection process for key positions, like Renee has outlined, for the city manager, which is effectively the CEO, but as well as Section 56 managers. What these are senior managers in the city who report directly to the city manager. And these senior managers oversee the various departments that are in the city. Johannesburg has a slightly different structure, where we have what we call municipal entities as well. And these municipal entities actually execute on the service delivery in the city. So,
sorry, once again, it's very much like a subsidiary of a wholly owned subsidiary of
precisely, Bill. So
The municipal council is prohibited from instructing any municipal official in the administration to do anything or not to do anything, or to be even infer or interfere in any way in the city's administration. So we effectively don't actually have power to instruct, manage, and control officials.
And Councillor, tell me, how do you feel about that? Being in that situation where people complain to you about their problems, and yet you are prevented from actually doing anything. And in fact, does that mean that the councillor is actually irrelevant? Should one really have councillors?
So, if I can be completely honest with you, it is very difficult. It is very challenging. The city has this escalation process where essentially a ward councillor for a specific community will receive a complaint from a resident where a certain entity or department has not fulfilled their duty or responsibility to that resident and resolve their problem, and then we escalate it to a certain manager within that department or entity. And there's sort of a multi-layer of different managers that you can escalate it up to, hoping that one of those managers will intervene and give the instruction down to the official to say, correct this, fix this, go out, rectify this power issue, rectify this water issue. However, as we see the city crumbling at the moment and service delivery grinding to a halt, we councillors get inundated with these escalations. I mean, any day we can receive well over 100 different escalation queries just on electricity alone. That doesn't include water, that doesn't include trees falling, that doesn't include road issues, that doesn't include revenue issues, and the list goes on and on and on.
Makes it a nightmare for you guys, I guess.
Absolutely, it does make it very difficult, especially when the city administration is not doing what it's supposed to be doing. And that's what we see increasingly. And this is being exacerbated and being made worse by the city's infrastructure that's so old and has not been maintained for so many years that continues to crumble and deteriorate and simply just give in. It does make the situation very difficult. However, that doesn't make the role of a councillor obsolete. Council is a political structure, and you have to elect a councillor to go there, represent your issues, and form a government.
So, Carl, maybe just to jump in.
Yes.
One of the problems within the city of Johannesburg is because we have these entities that have boards. Joburg Water, City Power, Joburg Property Company.
Yes.
So instead of them just being subsidiaries, they're these wholly owned companies that have boards that actually cost the city a whole heap of money that is actually unnecessary.
Yes.
Not only that, is that when you look at the actual systems and the structure of how it's structured, is that all of us would think that when our meters are read, that information would go straight into a single system. But that's not the case. Each of these entities have their own system called MRQC, into which the readings go. And then very often what happens is that those readings that are read by the meter readers are manually adjusted before it's sent to City of Johannesburg, where the billing happens. And before it gets sent to us again, it's again manually adjusted before it gets sent to us, which is very often why we get the bills that we get, and also why it takes so long before things are fixed. Because it has to go through all of these layers before it has to get fixed, which is a problem, instead of it just being. So there's an enormous amount, in the city of Johannesburg specifically, there's an enormous amount of money that gets wasted, where a meter can be read remotely, both water, electricity and gas can get read remotely. There's all of these manual things where we're paying money for doing things manually, which is wrong, and it needs to be adjusted, and then you ask for a job card and you can't get a job card. And I think also, just to get back what the role of a councillor is that, and I mean, we're involved in having to do that for some of for our clients as well, is that you try and get a job card and you go to Joburg Water and they say, we can't give you a job card. We're not allowed to give you a job card. Because before there was a court case when somebody manually manipulated on PDF, adjusted a job card. So now they're not allowed to do that.
What I understand from that is that they're all working in silos. They're not really communicating between the different silos, and of course that produces huge problems. Thanks, Rena. That sets out that very clearly. How does this impact on the council, city councillors?
So a councillor's job, and again, Carl, correct me if I'm wrong. So a councillor's job is to liaise with us as residents in the community. What are our concerns? What are the things that we like to see happen in the area? Also to have a look at the infrastructure. What are the things that are wrong? And to communicate those things to council, obviously, and to represent us in council. A councillor is not allowed to instruct. Okay, he can ask, just like we can. He can ask, he can escalate on our behalf, but he or she may not, under any circumstances, instruct an administration to do something.
That's a very important point to make, because it's actually legislated in terms of the Municipal Systems Act. There's a councillor code of conduct. I think it's Schedule 1.
Thanks, Rena. I think that in terms of you really encapsulate the problem that one has. Renata, can I turn to you at this stage and say, let's hear what the community has to say. And they're a very important part of this whole equation. How is the community feeling? And we've had some questions coming through, and maybe you could just talk a little bit about how the community
Absolutely, Paul. Thank you. Looking at the questions that we received, I hear what Renee has said about the councillors' roles being reduced to fielding queries. And being a resident myself, I understand the frustration that we experience if we contact the councillor and we are advised to, for example, the city's bankrupt, you have to get your own JoJo tanks, or you need to get more solar panels because it's not going to get better. So it almost leaves us with a feeling of zero hope. And I feel, there's also a role for councillors to play to try and keep the hope going, because I think there's a lot of positive things happening in the background that we as residents don't necessarily know. We're not aware of it. So I think there the councillor can play a huge role. And I was wondering, because a lot of the questions that came through, it was clear that there's uncertainty between what the role of the councillor is versus the role of the residents' associations, because they feel in many instances the residents' association actually came to the rescue where they were actually expecting the ward councillor to come to the rescue. So if you can maybe clarify what should SAPRA do, or any of the other ratepayers associations versus the ward councillor,
Yes.
and what the difference in their powers are.
Yes.
That's a fantastic question. There's twofold to the role. There's ups and there's downs in the role. The role is very hectic, extremely demanding of your time. I find on a daily basis you rush into a plethora of meetings from one place to the next. You're meeting with different entities, you're meeting with different officials, and you're trying to get issues solved. You're also on site. I find I'm having to go to the depot multiple times throughout the week to get issues solved. So out of the schedule of going to different meetings, I have to carve time out, drive to the depot to follow up on issues that are not getting resolved. And in between all of this, I have to try and find time to phone people back, respond to messages that I've received, and there's tons that are coming in every single day. And there's practically there's no days off. Weekends we're busy working, trying to assist residents. Public holidays we're working, so you literally get absolutely no downtime. And it does take a toll and affect your family time as well, because you should be spending time with your family, you're trying to respond to people, you're trying to chase up on issues, and it's very difficult. I see, some of my colleagues are struggling and battling at the moment. Their physical health is taking a toll because of the pressure and the sheer exhaustion. Their mental health is taking an issue, and it's a very tough job. It's extremely difficult. But there is ups. There certainly is ups. Even though not being in government, we are pushing and trying to achieve certain things. My ward is particularly hard hit with water issues, and there's an infrastructure project that's finally going to get off the ground this year to help alleviate some of that pressure. And this has been kicked down the road multiple year after year after year. Now finally we're getting some action happening. So there are some positives that can come of it. And I think it's the fundamental belief that we can make this city great. We can make this city amazing, and a place that we all want to live in, bring up a family in. And it's this desire and this vision I have to say I wake up every single day because I want to make the city great. Like the people who inhabit the city. We've got phenomenal people all across the city. And I want the city to be a mirror image of the people of the city. We can make South Africa great. We can make South Africa work. And that's why I get up every single day to make that a reality.
Okay, Carl, thanks. I'd like to hear a little bit more about your roles and your responsibilities to the different organizations like the party and the city and your family, of course. Yes. Perhaps you could just tell us a little bit about that.
Thank you, Bill. Yes, we do have multiple other obligations. So we have obligations as well to our political parties, where we have to participate in a whole host of different meetings, policy discussions, strategy sessions, also campaigning. We have constant by-elections that happen in other municipalities around that we have to go drive out to and participate in to help retain those wards or win those wards. So there is a whole nother job that you have to do in terms of your obligation to your political party, in terms of participating and contributing to that. There's also the aspect and our obligation to council, where we have to attend Section 79 committee meetings and we have to attend council meetings. And this is where we interrogate and debate reports. At council, certain reports, bylaws, policy items, and budgets do come, and they get debated on by all the various political parties represented in council. However, we do find it has become increasingly challenging debating these reports, because when you try and stand up and interrogate a report, you get heckled, screamed at, insults thrown from the other side, and they try and disrupt you from speaking, stop you from speaking. There's been times and occasions where I've tried to speak on an oversight report and they come with this unwritten rule to say, well, we don't debate oversight reports in council. And I've been blocked twice from speaking on oversight reports where I was not allowed to speak at all. And this was allowed by the Speaker of Council. So they do try and suppress our voice and don't allow us to speak. And sometimes they even collapse council, and council comes at a cost of 500,000 Rand for one council sitting. And if we don't finish that agenda that day, we have to reconvene council at a later date, and the city has to spend another 500,000 to put that council sitting together. And it's honestly a waste of ratepayers' money.
But let's move on now to the next question. Renata, I'm sure you've got lots of questions there.
I do have a few left. So Judy wants to know what recourse we as residents have when we feel that the ward councillor isn't communicating effectively or representing us properly. And on that, I'm really interested to know how councillors' performance is judged and managed, and how you are held account by your respective parties.
So in terms of councillors' communication, I'll say sometimes it is a bit of a challenge, because on any given day, councillors are inundated with tons of phone calls, messages, and emails that we have to respond to. And we have to try and find time in between all the meetings we have to rush to try and respond and get some feedback. And then when a query is fielded to you, you have to get information from the relevant entity department on that specific issue. And sometimes you don't always get that feedback, or it takes a really long time to get that feedback. So that could be causing the communication breakdown, because as a councillor, you have to wait sometimes 7, 8, 10 hours, sometimes days, sometimes weeks to get a response from a specific entity department on an issue. And unfortunately, you don't have the information on hand to give to the resident. But sometimes if you are repeatedly trying to get information from your councillor and you are being ignored, you can take it up with the political party of that councillor. Each political party in council has a chief whip, and that's to sort of manage discipline of councillors for that specific political party, and that can be taken up with the chief whip of the respective party. And you can find that information on the party's website to reach out as well. And in terms of performance management, I believe each political party does their own performance management of councillors. I know we have certain targets in performance management that we have to reach and meet to ensure that we are trying to assist residents as best as we possibly can, on top of our other political duties and roles.
Okay, now that's an interesting point, because there was some discussion on our WhatsApp group about why we should have councillors belonging to political parties. Would an independent councillor be better? And I think the answer to that you just touched on there, Carl, because there is an infrastructure behind you, and there is people looking at your performance and making sure that you are doing the things that you should be doing. So an independent councillor wouldn't actually have that sort of structures.
Precisely, Bill. And if I can just add a little bit more onto that as well. Our law allows for independents to stand for council, and now for provincial and national parliament as well. However, independents have had very little to no success actually getting elected. And this takes away votes that you could give to a political party that has better chances. You know, politics is a numbers game, and numbers matter in council. The more seats you have in council gives you a bigger say and gives you more influence in council. And if you have enough seats, you can actually form a government and manage and turn around the city. Whereas an independent who has one seat can't do that.
I think a very good example of that, what happened in Umgeni down in Natal, where I think it was 42 votes, was it, that actually changed the whole nature of the thing?
Precisely, Bill. Umgeni was one of the worst run municipalities in the country, falling apart. It's in a rural KZN, very small town. However, in 2021, in that local government election, the government was changed by just 42 votes cast by residents of that community. And that municipality has been turned around and is flourishing. Streets are getting reinstated, street lights are getting fixed, the grass is getting cut, parks are getting maintained, public facilities are getting upgraded, small and medium-sized enterprises are getting seed funding to help start. Support is given to rural communities there, and we're seeing fantastic things happen. And as you said, just changed by 42 votes. So every single vote matters. Residents have to come out, have to participate, and ensure that a good and accountable government is elected at the end of the day.
Thanks. Can we move on now to the next question? Renata, have you got another one for us?
I do, thank you, Bill. And I think this might be my last two questions. So James, specifically on this, he asked, what avenues and tools does the Residents Association have available to them that the councillor doesn't?
The association is a group of voluntary and committed residents who wish to try and make a difference. The money that we have as a Residents Association is minimal compared to the budget of the city, and all our work is done by volunteers. So in effect, there's very little that we can do practically, but what we can do is to hold people responsible. And that I see as the role of civil society. We need to ensure that we are watching very carefully what's going on both at the political level and the administrative level, and let it be known that when we come to vote the next time round, that vote is very important and will be a reflection of the performance of that particular city setup. Let me just say there are a number of civil society organizations that have been formed in the recent past, and they're all starting to make their feelings felt. In particular, SAPRA has an association with OTA for something called Joburg CAN, that's Community Active Network, and they are doing some very good work in liaising with the city and saying this is what should happen, and to partner with some of the city officials to try and make sure things actually happen where there's little knowledge about how those things should happen. So civil society does have a role, but it cannot take over the role of the city.
So, Bill, maybe if I can just answer Renata on just maybe what can somebody like SAPRA does versus a councillor. I think that there's a number of volunteers or activists or whatever that put in their time. And councillors, as Kyle also said, and I know that they are overwhelmed with, we get overwhelmed by the number of stuff that needs to happen. And they're overwhelmed with the number of queries that get done. So, and it's a single person that needs to sometimes look at per day at a couple of hundred things that gets escalated, apart from the normal stuff that they need to take care of on a normal day as part of their job. Whereas when you look at somebody like SAPRA, where there's a couple of volunteers that on our group, on our community group, that are now taking care of it, it's a couple of people who can take care of it. So things might get resolved quicker through that process. And I think that's where the difference is. So it's not because SAPRA as a community has access to stuff that the councillor doesn't. It's just it's a capacity issue.
Yes, yeah. And I think that's an important point that you raise. And in my ward, and I think it's the same in Ward 117, is that when you can foster good relationships between the residents' associations and the councillor, you can put sort of collective efforts together and get more done and achieve more. And it assists, especially to counter the decline and mismanagement that we have in the city. Just to have more people working towards one sort of goal for the community assists, and you get better outcomes and you manage to achieve those goals. So I think it's important to have that collaborative effort. But just with being a councillor and council itself as a structure, there are many cases in this country where we've gotten it right, where the right political parties and individuals are elected to council and represent the interests of the residents. And you see that in the outcomes in this country. There are a number of municipalities in this country that are thriving, that are doing well, because they have a well-constituted council that has a good government at its head, good mayor, good MMCs that appoint the right officials who care about the residents, who care about their work, and who are very competent, diligent, and dedicated to the task at hand.
Thanks, Carl. That, I think, effectively answers that question. But one that's in my mind, and Renata, you might agree with this, is people saying, well, what can I do about it? Is there anything that I can do to actually help solve this problem? So, let me answer my own question, and that is to get involved. If you are passionate about these issues and you are worried about it, then for goodness sake, get involved. Either join some organization like SAPRA or join the political party that you feel most comfortable with, and actually make sure that your voice is heard in those particular forums. That, to me, is what you can do. Get involved. Get involved is so important. Let's also explore some of the other questions that might arise.
Certainly, Bill. On the question of the power and influence, or lack thereof, that the ward councillors have, Judy wanted to know specifically just how much power and influence you do have. Renee mentioned, for example, you should be looking at more strategic matters, taking the city forward, but however, you are bogged down by all these admin queries because things are just not functioning the way that they should. So in the ideal world, what would you as a ward councillor be doing, and what would your power and influence look like?
So in an ideal world, a council will look at the policy direction, strategy of the city. The city develops an IDP, Integrated Development Plan, and that's essentially the plan of the city. What are the priorities for the city across its various departments, entities, regions and wards in the city? And a council should be doing oversight on that. A councillor needs to also be going to what we have is Section 79 committees. These are legislative committees where these committees mirror the various departments and sometimes entities that fall under these departments in the city, and to perform oversight over these. So we get reports about these entities' performance, and their budget allocations and how they're spending that budget, and we're supposed to be doing oversight on that.
You say supposed, does that not really work in practice?
So we do perform oversight, but I suppose then the issue becomes is a consequence managed after that. And the only people that can effectively implement consequences against the administration is the mayor and his mayoral committee. Yeah. As an individual councillor who's not part of the government, we can raise these issues, which we do. We thoroughly interrogate these reports, we raise issues, and we raise them in council, in the committee, with the relevant mayoral committee member, with the mayor, and sometimes we have to resort to going to the media as well for that additional pressure to get these problems solved and get them action.
So civil society can help as far as that's concerned, just bringing pressure.
Yes, absolutely, Paul. That's absolutely correct.
And I mean, just to give you a really good example, the current budget for the Ombudsman's office is 40 million rand a year. The Ombudsman's office is there for us as residents to escalate things to when the city has not taken care of them. The Ombudsman's office, in real terms, has actually become a query resolution office for the city because they don't resolve queries, everybody runs to the Ombudsman's office. And I'm going to be very straight here, is that because we've dealt with it, in that the Ombudsman's office is not capable of resolving queries. The people employed by the Ombudsman's office are led by the nose by the people within the Revenue Office because they don't understand what's going on, so they can't fight it, and then they get led by the nose and they just give the garbage back to you and me. So, and it takes forever. The Ombudsman's office is meant to be separate, and we actually help write the new bylaws for the Ombudsman to supposedly give them more teeth. They report to the Speaker of Council. We've gone to the current Speaker of Council and said to them, we've not had, for 3 years, any outcome from the Ombudsman's office. It's now resulted in going to court. So we try to escalate things to the Public Protector, but the Public Protector's office can't take it on unless there's been an outcome by the Ombudsman. So the Ombudsman just doesn't give an outcome. Okay, so you can't escalate it. So the only thing that we have is that we can go to court. Yet you and I, as residents, spend a huge amount of money for this budget that gets paid to the Ombudsman's office that actually ultimately adds no value. And the Speaker, and this is where the problem is that we sit with, and where we can make a difference ultimately, where it's important, where we put our crosses at the end of the day, because the Speaker controls Council from the political point of view, and also controls the Ombudsman side, which is supposed to be independent. But they take no action as far as when the only consequence or the only place where we can go when things don't get get done properly is the Ombudsman's office. When the Ombudsman's office doesn't do anything, we then go to the Speaker and say, please, can you take action? And they go and they don't do anything.
Okay, I think that's been a very, very interesting discussion, and hopefully our residents will find it useful. I'd like to start wrapping up now, and perhaps just hear from all of you just some final comments that you'd like to make. Renee, perhaps you'd like to start.
Thank you, Bill. I think just like we heard a little bit earlier about Ungeni, where change happens in small bits, 42 votes. I think that for me, the biggest thing is when I look at it is that if ratepayers associations start working together, I think that we will create a lot more positive change. So just SAPRA working on its own, it's a smaller community. But if we start putting Parkview and Parkhurst and all the different ratepayers associations together, I think it will make a difference. Our pipes don't finish at the end of Ward 117. The water pipes, electricity pipes, and sewer pipes. They're all interconnected. We're interconnected communities. Whether we're in the city, whether we're in the province, whether we're in the country, we're all interconnected, just like our pipes. And I think that the more we work together, the better the change will be. But the change starts with us, with each one of us. So just like the vote, the change starts with our vote, where we do that. It starts with that. How we deal with one another and the respect that we show for one another. I think also it starts with us doing, maybe from a ratepayers associations, that we start working together. I think that more money will get raised, there's more impact from a communication point of view. I think it'll make a difference.
Thanks, Renee. Renata, would you like to make some comments?
Thank you, Bill. I can only echo what Renee is saying. I do believe there is strength in numbers, and also what she said, the change starts with each one of us. So you have to be the change that you seek. If you're going to be sitting grumbling at home and just slating your ward councillor around the braai, things are not going to be improving. You need to try and determine what you can do to make the difference and get out there, because each of us has that power, even if you just go and vote.
Thank you, Renata. Nice ending to that. Carl, do you want to make some final comments?
Thanks, Bill. Definitely. And I want to say thank you to SAPRA for putting this a platform together. It's fantastic to engage like this, to help answer some questions and give clarity to some of the questions that residents have, but what actually goes on. And I do want to just encourage residents, hope is not lost. We've got an amazing city with amazing people. And if you all just come out, participate in your residents association, come out to vote, and just make a small contribution towards your community. It can be in whatever capacity, in whatever way, we can make a serious difference and make this city great. Thank you.
Well said, Carl. I like that. I've always regarded Johannesburgers as people who are very positive and are able to create change. So, Johannesburgers, can you step forward and, like Renee suggested, get involved? Like, for example, we would like people to come and comment on proposed legislation, see what happens on the budget side of the city. Perhaps we can contribute as far as that's concerned. Love to have you with SAPRA. SAPRA is your community organisation. Own it and take care of it. Thank you all for watching.